I need to vent because after 31 years in the criminal justice field, we need to change the culture around victims and offenders of assaultive crimes. I hope you will stay tuned for this really important podcast because you can actually make a difference. Welcome to the SAFeTy Chronicles, exploring how to keep people and pets safe from the cycle of interpersonal violence. I am your host, Allie Phillips, founder and CEO of Sheltering Animals and Families Together, the SAFeTy Program, a nonprofit organization working with domestic violence shelters to eliminate the pet housing barrier to safety. As the founder, I have led the global movement in helping domestic violence shelters create on-site pet housing while elevating the criminal justice response to how animal abuse links to crimes against people. I am a former prosecuting attorney, internationally recognized legal expert, and public speaker, award-winning author, and advocate for protecting vulnerable victims. In this podcast, we will explore how and why animals are harmed in the cycle of family violence and the human-animal bond that keeps victims in harm's way with their pets. Guest speakers and I will share strategies for shelters and professionals working to safeguard survivors, why pet-inclusive sheltering is life-saving, and safety tips for those who need help. None of the content will be graphic. If you are in harm's way, please contact your nearest domestic violence shelter or call the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-7233. Let's get started. I'm so glad that you're here because I need to vent. And maybe you're feeling the same way, or maybe you're going to be highly offended by what I say, but this may be controversial, but it has plagued me my entire career. I am fed up so much with the public response, the government response, the media response, the criminal justice focus, primarily on victims of violence rather than shining a light on the offenders. I'm not going to be talking about victim-centric response to help victims heal and get justice. That's not what I'm talking about. When I look at research studies and statistics, we are not lacking in how many victims there are annually of assault, domestic violence, sexual assault, rape, and more. I hear about these statistics at conferences. I hear about them in podcasts. I hear about them in the news and recited on the floor of Congress. And they are hyper-focused on victims. And I'm actually going to show you some slides. But they are hyper-focused on victims. How many victims? What are the demographics of the victims? To me, it is intrusive for those who are experiencing trauma from what happened to them. It's yet another spotlight on the victim that is unnecessary. We are seeing too many news reports of women who delay disclosure of abuse or sexual assault, particularly against powerful, wealthy, or famous men. As I record this, Eric Swalwell is all over the news. The Epstein files have been in the news for a while. And there's been a focus that the victims need to testify before Congress, when instead, why are they not calling all of the men, and there are a few women, who are listed in the files and potentially could be offenders? Why do the victims need to testify? Why don't they bring the people in that are named? Now, I'm not here to pass judgment on whether the accusations are true. The court system will handle that, hopefully. What I'm here to talk about is that now is the time to change the culture of how we talk about these cases. Let me show you some slides. So globally, 1 in 3 women over the age of 15 will experience an assault in their lifetime. And 1 in 5 women will be raped, especially here in the US. My mind goes to all the women who are under threat from men. Period. I'm going to say that again. My mind goes to all the women who are under threat from men. We live in a culture where violence against women is pervasive, it's questioned, it's tolerated, and it has been since the beginning of documented time. So can we all just agree on that and instead focus on why men are so violent? Can we take the focus off of the victims, their age, their demographics, their gender, their race, their religion? Can we just take the focus off of that, because all women are in jeopardy, and instead put a spotlight on why men are so violent to women? Who are these men? What is their age range? What is their socioeconomic status? What is their job, their career? Are they married? Do they have kids? Are they educated? What is their race? What is their religion? What is their ethnicity? But the focus doesn't go on that, does it? Why has our society focused so much on the victims and so little on the offenders? And like I said, when it comes to helping victims of assaultive crimes, it should be victim-centered for their healing and recovery. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the reporting of assaults, the publicity involving assaults, especially of wealthy, powerful, and famous men. So let me share some statistics. So this is from RAINN, Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network. Nearly every minute someone is sexually assaulted in the United States. 80% of female college students do not report. I was a prosecutor in the jurisdiction of Michigan State University, which is my alma mater. I am very, very sadly all too familiar with the reporting and lack thereof of sexual assaults happening on campus, and especially when an athlete is accused. Because the athletes on university campuses, they are the elite. And I sadly dealt with too many of those situations. When we look at elderly victims of sexual assault, only 28% report. And victims do not report out of fear of retaliation. That's 20%. 13% believe that the police will do nothing. 13% believe that it's a personal matter that maybe they can take care of, or maybe they just want to ignore and try to forget about. 8% report to a different official. Maybe it is a university official or a church or a school. 8% believed that it wasn't important to report, and that would be interesting to dig into the why. And 7% didn't want the offender to get into trouble. Now, when we switch the focus and focus on the offenders, 98% of offenders walk free from their crime. I want you to let that sit. 98% walk free from their crime. For every 1,000 sexual assaults, only 50 reports lead to an arrest. And from there, only 28 cases lead to a felony conviction. And then from there, only 25 are sentenced to incarceration. That is 0.025% of sexual assault offenders that are actually sentenced and incarcerated for their crime. That is disgusting. That is disgusting. Now let's dig a little deeper into the offenders, because everybody loves to dig in a little deeper into the victims. Let's flip the script. Let's start focusing on the offenders. And when I researched who are these offenders, this is what I found. 31% of offenders are strangers to their victims, but 60% are known. And of the 60%, over 28% are by well-known or casual acquaintances, over 21% are intimate partners, and over 13% are relatives. These offenders, over half of them, are 30 years and older. 57% are white, 27% are black, and 37% have prior felony convictions. So they are known to the system. But then when I researched the men who are powerful, wealthy, and famous offenders, it was a little disturbing that there are no statistics. It's not being tracked. Or if it's being tracked, I certainly couldn't find it. But this is what I found. Sexual assault perpetrators who are powerful, wealthy, famous, often share demographics similar to the general offender population, being primarily men and primarily white. Now, they tend to be older, over the age of 30. They hold high status positions like CEOs, managers, public figures, and they use their influence to exploit power imbalances and silencing their victims through threats to career or reputation. We've all seen that. We've all seen that going as far back as Monica Lewinsky and even further back from there. These powerful, wealthy, famous offenders occupy positions of authority, such as being a boss, a coach, a public figure. They use their wealth to secure legal protection, to foster a culture of silence, and they may be serial offenders before detection. High socioeconomic status is actually used as a shield against the consequences of their conduct. The victims they target are young, less influential, and dependent on the perpetrator for employment. So hence, that's why they remain silent. They're fearful, they're traumatized, they feel like no one's going to believe them. They don't have the money, they don't have the support to go after somebody famous, wealthy, powerful. And so we don't know how many of these cases are not reported. Now, I'm just going to speculate based on my expertise in this field, and I would speculate that less than 1% of these cases are actually reported at some point, even if it's 10, 20, 30 years down the road, like Harvey Weinstein. I would speculate less than 1%. Because of this power imbalance, because they target the victims who are young. They may not just have life experience wisdom. They may feel like nobody's going to support them. They were told that their behavior contributed to it. They don't have the money to fight it. They're worried that it's going to destroy their life forever, because that's what we've seen. That's what we've seen, right? And so who in their right mind would ever come forward and report? And that is sadly the culture that we have allowed in this country. We have more disclosures coming forward involving powerful, wealthy, and famous men who are being called out for their acts of violence against women. So there is a shift happening. And I am finding that shift is slowly starting to happen because there are more women coming out. It creates a club, a sisterhood, where they can band together. We're seeing it in the Epstein files, where they are not speaking out singularly. They are speaking out collectively. They do it in a group. There is safety in numbers. Haven't we all learned that? Safety in numbers. So we have lived in a world where women are just often not believed, where allegations of sexual assault and rape are dissected with invasive precision that women would just rather not report. Women have been taught that if we report, well, first of all, the gaslighting is going to start. Are you really sure it happened? There's going to be a lot of deflection, a lot of blame on the woman, picking apart every action, and society eats it up. And if the man is powerful, wealthy, or famous, the victim will be destroyed even more than by the original assault. And that's what has become commonplace. So as a society, we've allowed this, we've tolerated this, and maybe you found yourself questioning, why is she reporting now after all this time? Have you ever thought that? I'm not saying you're to blame. That's how we have been taught. We have been taught by the media, by politics, by religion, by culture, by society. We have been programmed to question the hidden motives of a female victim rather than having the instant thought, why did he do it? Instead, a lot of people, their first thought is, why is she reporting now after all this time? So as a former prosecutor, I handled far too many assault, domestic violence, sexual assault, and rape cases against women, adult women, and against children. Many of the cases where he said, she said, where there was no other evidence, maybe because it was a delayed disclosure. There was no medical evidence. I saw most, if not all, of my male prosecution colleagues refusing to issue criminal charges in those cases, saying, well, I don't believe her. But when questioned, they couldn't really say why. I, on the other hand, was known for issuing charges on the he said, she said cases. I was known for taking those cases to trial. Because after the initial report, I went to work with my detective to corroborate as much of her testimony as possible, because an excellent prosecutor never puts a victim on the stand alone. We make sure that there's other evidence to back her up. I actually had that typed out and taped to the wall in my office. An excellent prosecutor never puts a victim on the stand alone. Now, do victims lie about abuse in order to ruin the life of an alleged offender? Possibly, but I can tell you it's very rare. It's very rare. Because the truth always outs. If we allow it, if we don't gaslight and try to manipulate the information, it will always come out. Now, I want you to think about the courage and the strength it takes to report an assault. Maybe you are a survivor of any type of assault, or maybe you're not. Let me walk you through two examples, because this is what I saw. This is what I saw in the courtroom. This is what I continue to see in society. I'm going to talk about two different victims. The first one reports immediately while still under the trauma of the assault. She calls the police. The police arrive, and police can be accusatory and combative with victims, especially if it's a male officer. I have seen victims interrogated rather than questioned with open-ended questions, which allows just for the information to be told. I've seen a lot of interrogation styles on victims, and it's not right. This victim is questioned about what she wore, what clothing she wore. Was she drinking? Was she on drugs? Was she at a bar? Was she walking alone? Did she flirt or lead the man on? Did she send mixed signals? Then, assuming the officer takes a decent report, it then goes to the prosecutor, who decides whether there is enough evidence to issue criminal charges. And if it's a he said, she said, most prosecutors won't issue charges. And I often heard, well, I believe her, but there's not enough there. Well, that's actual BS, because that's not, prosecutors have a lot of decision and a lot of judgment. But it is not for us to make that ultimate decision. Prosecutors are not the judge and the jury. Prosecutors decide if there is probable cause that a crime was committed and that the defendant probably did it, and is there a likelihood of prevailing in court? Not the beyond a reasonable doubt. Is there a likelihood of prevailing? Okay, let's say it gets past the prosecutor and charges are issued. If it gets to court and it gets to a trial, the victim is put on trial. I saw it in every single case. The victim is put on trial, and it is allowed by the prosecutor. It's allowed by the judge. I objected all the time, and I got overruled by the judge all the time. Here's the thing that I once argued in a closing argument in one of my cases. And I started it with, let's assume everything that I just said. Let's just assume she wore suggestive clothing. She was drinking. She was on drugs. She was flirting. She sent mixed signals. She was alone. Let's just assume all of that is true. Is the offender so physically, emotionally, and mentally unstable that it excuses his violence? Man, did I get objections over that. But I aim to always keep the focus on the offender and not the victim, because the victims are never, ever, ever on trial according to the law. It's the people, it's society, it's culture, it's the media that puts them on trial. Okay, then let's say we get through trial. Then it goes to a judge or a jury to make the decision. And we are battling their beliefs in making the decision because we're all programmed, right? So we got to get past that. And then if there's a conviction, the victim's behavior is often taken into account for sentencing. Like, well, she did behave in this way, and they use it like as a mitigation. When legally it's not a mitigating factor, but they do. They do, and so the sentence is more lenient. So all of that happens. So imagine the strength and the courage of somebody who comes forward to report, knowing all of that is waiting for them. Now let's make it even more difficult, a delayed report, which is, again, we don't have statistics on this, but in my experience, it was a majority of my cases. So I want you to take everything that I just talked about and now add in the suspicion of a delayed disclosure, where police, prosecutors, judges, and juries are all judging the delayed disclosure. All of them actually need to be educated on what a trauma response is. They need to be educated why there was a delayed disclosure, and then taking the reason for the delay and admitting it at trial. I've had many prosecutors and judges tell me, you can't do that. Oh, yes, you can. Oh, yes, you can. If the offender threatened the victim during the crime, after the crime, if there is a prior relationship of coercive control, if there is a power imbalance, a powerful, wealthy, famous person, that's threatening. All of that can be introduced at trial to explain the delayed disclosure, because you and I know that the defense will wave the delay like a flag of innocence. And that is when the prosecutor can bring it in to rebut or explain. I was allowed to bring it in many times to preempt a delayed disclosure defense, because it's not really a defense. So I was allowed to bring it in. So don't ever let anybody tell you you can't bring it in. So my message in this podcast is that all of society and the entire criminal justice system needs to immediately and rapidly shift away from such a highlighted focus on the victims and who the victims are. And we need to start spotlighting the offenders. Now, when it comes to recovery and healing and services, absolutely victim-centered. That's not what I'm talking about, okay? We need to put a laser focus on the offenders, because without the offenders, we wouldn't have victims. Let's go to the root of the problem, and the root of the problem is never the victims. Never, never, never. The root of the problem is men who believe that violence is okay. It is upon all of us to change this culture of victim blaming and tolerance. Each person can and should speak out when a man is abusive to a woman. Each person can and should believe the victims when they come forward, because this will shift the culture to more reporting in a quicker manner. Getting help like a medical exam, which can result in corroborating evidence. But when a victim believes that no one will believe her, that she will be blamed, that she is going up against somebody powerful, wealthy, and famous, why on earth would anybody report? And that's where we're at. And that victim will suffer trauma in silence, suffer shame in silence, and that can lead to a host of physical, emotional, and mental health imbalances. We can change this power dynamic by changing how we think of and view the courageous and brave victims who come forward, and being public about it. Don't sit back and be silent. So as you can tell, I'm pretty hot on this topic. Pretty angry about it. I've been angry my entire career on this topic. So if you've gotten to this point, thank you for listening, because you and I, we can change this. We can absolutely change this. You do not have to be in the field to change this. And if you are in the field, please change this. Please change your agency culture on this. Let's put the spotlight on the offenders, because they are the root cause of this. All right. Thanks for letting me rant and vent. I love a good vent. I do. I love a good one. I've got another one coming up, so stay tuned. If you are in harm's way and need help, please visit the Pet Inclusive Shelter listing at SAFeTyProgram.org, call your nearest domestic violence shelter, or call the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-7233. Want to support our efforts and help us keep the SAFeTy Startup Manual free for domestic violence shelters? Consider donating at SAFeTyProgram.org/donate. Your donation saves lives.